discovering your values is critical. Then you can start to build habits and ideally an identity around your values. There is a golden zone of flow. And if you push yourself a few percent beyond your perceived limits, you're likely to get an even deeper flow state because there's a little bit of urgency and risk there. But you can't go too far beyond your perceived limits because then we slide into anxiety and we start to worry about the outcome. What are the skills that support the most resilient people, the highest performers? Last year's study was fascinating because in previous years, we found that focus, the ability to focus on what matters most to you, was the primary driver of resilience. But this has shifted, especially post-COVID. And we're finding a very interesting mix of skills supporting the most resilient people. We're sleeping 6.3 hours per night. So our sleep has been disrupted, and sleep is critical for all aspects of our well-being. You name it, from our ability to focus our minds through to metabolism, through to memory consolidation. Sleep is just critical.
What one key piece of advice would you like to give to all the entrepreneurs watching and listening today?
Stay curious. I think sometimes we lose our curiosity. We get so caught up in the grind set that our vision becomes quite narrow, and we lose track of opportunities that might be popping up in our peripheral vision.
Hello, and welcome to the Business Growth Show, where I interview successful entrepreneurs on all areas of business and how to utilize them for exponential growth. My name is Nathan Cassiotis. I'm a business growth expert, investor, and international speaker, where I help business owners grow and scale to create wealth and freedom. Today, I have an awesome guest. His name is Bradley Hook, and he's an author, speaker, creative technologist, and entrepreneur. He leads the Resilience Lab at the Resilience Institute, pioneering integrated approaches to human performance and well-being with cutting-edge technology. And he's the author of several books, including the forthcoming Start With Values from Penguin Random House, and he's a regular contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine. And Brad hosts two popular podcasts, the Brad Hook Podcast and the Resilience Podcast, where he interviews academics, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and change makers. And he's dedicated to discovering, unpacking, and sharing tools that upgrade consciousness and elevate the human experience. Welcome, Bradley Hook, and thank you for being on the Business Growth Show.
Ethan, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, awesome, mate. And I had the pleasure of just being on your podcast as well, and now getting you on mine. So it's amazing that we get to share and collaborate, right, in these areas here to showcase our geniuses. So it's awesome that you're on the show today. Really looking forward to it. I'm sure you're going to share a lot of value with everyone watching and listening. So you are a successful entrepreneur. So for those people don't know who you are, just introduce yourself by telling us a little bit more about you and your journey.
Thanks, Ethan. So I grew up in South Africa. I left pretty young. I moved over to the UK, and I had a dream of becoming a successful photojournalist. That's kind of what I studied, what I was interested in. I've always been interested in how people tell stories and how we can tell our stories more effectively, and perhaps even how we can rewrite our own stories. Although I wasn't aware of self-development as a field or anything like that back then, it was very much just an inkling. I dived into the corporate world. I found it fascinating. I worked within some large organizations, rapidly climbing the ranks just because of my curiosity. I was interested in pretty much everything from computer programming to writing to how to build processes and technologies that will support people to be more effective in their roles, to support companies and being more productive, to support growth. And along the way, created lots of interesting platforms, moved from tech companies to insurance to telecoms, really just trying to soak it all in. How does this thing called business really work? What are the dynamics that create a workplace culture? And some of it was unconscious and some of it was quite conscious. I then set up my first business when I moved to Australia several years later, based out of Sydney. And my objective was to help organizations better tell their stories using digital technologies. So that involved video, that involved web design, application design, user interfaces, all of that kind of thing. And it was wonderful until I experienced a massive burnout, which is part of the reason I developed this real interest in well-being, resilience, and core values, and so forth. Along the way, I created some platforms. One was a surfing magazine, which has gone on to become one of the most popular surfing magazines in the world. It's been around for over 2 decades, which blows my mind. A carbon offsetting system long before that kind of thing was fashionable. So imagine in 2004, trying to explain to people why we should plant trees to capture carbon from the atmosphere. But it was quite successful as well, had investors come on board. And then I actually got the opportunity after having my personal meltdown, burnout experience to go traveling around the world. And I interviewed people from all walks of life, trying to unpack the keys to sustainable high performance, because that's what I felt I needed. And I'd learned a lot along the way. I'd helped many thought leaders build their own businesses, platforms that were incredibly successful. And then I thought, what if I start to apply some of what I've learned to my own businesses? Created some startups that didn't work, which is a huge part of the learning experience, lots of ideas along the way. And then I connected with the Resilience Institute in New Zealand and became a partner in the organization. Now, as you mentioned, leading the Resilience Lab, having some real impact around the world, but navigating COVID and various ups and downs has been a challenge, but there've also been many opportunities. So I've learned a huge amount along the way, and more recently founded the Values Institute, which is part of my values movement, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. So yeah, there've been many ventures. Many did not succeed, and many have been highly successful. And along the way, I really did learn some tools for entrepreneurship, which I write about in my column on Entrepreneur Magazine.
Yeah, awesome, mate. What a story. I love that. And I love, yeah, that there are ups and downs. Not everything's going to work, but you keep moving forward. And, I think that your journey showcases that. And it sounds like you're getting more into your genius and where you can really, make the biggest impact, that purposeful impact, let's call it, so to speak. So, yeah, that's awesome, mate. Love all of that. So let's get into it now. So, I know you're big on resilience, right? And so firstly, I guess, because this term can be just put out there. What is resilience, and I guess what do you do at the Resilience Institute?
Yeah, great question. I often start my workshops with that very question. And if there are 30 people in a room, there'll be 30 different perspectives on what resilience means. So, resilience really came to prominence in particle physics and those types of fields where they wanted to test how a metal, for instance, would respond to a shock. Could it return to its original form? If it did, it's resilient. They started applying this principle to humans along the way. There were a few studies, a significant one in Kauai, where they looked at kids who came from difficult backgrounds, and some of them went on to thrive, and some really struggled for the rest of their lives. Now, from the Resilience Institute perspective, resilience is more than just bounce back or grit or perseverance or some coping strategies. It's much more aligned with the concept of anti-fragility, which I'll unpack. So our definition of resilience is the learned ability, because we can always learn these skills. We're not born resilient. It takes 18 years, in my case, and in most people's case, much, much longer before we feel ready for life's ups and downs. We learn these skills along the way. So it's a learned ability to bounce, which is to navigate challenge and adversity, and recognize that 77% of the time humans actually grow stronger as a result of challenge. It's called post-traumatic growth as opposed to post-traumatic stress. We do naturally bounce forward as a result of dealing with challenge. Our objective is to help people bounce forward fast, so we don't linger on a downward spiral for longer than is necessary, recognizing that a downward spiral is not the end of the world. We are all going to experience lots of adversity over the course of our lives. But having the self-awareness to be able to tune into the fact that, oh, I'm really struggling, I'm overwhelmed, or I'm demotivated, or my physical well-being, I'm suffering, I'm in a state of distress. Really important signals. And if we have the self-awareness, we can start that bounce process much faster. The second component is growth or habits and vitality. What can I do to ensure I have the energy and the resources needed for when those challenges and opportunities present themselves. The third component is connection, or our emotional and social fitness. One of my favorite quotes is, "An entity is defined by the nature of its connections." So having and building these rich, strong, robust connections with others is a great way to support our resilience. And finally, flow state. And this is often a surprise for many people that this is included in a definition of resilience. But in our busy, information-dense world, where there is so much competing for our often fragmented attention span, the ability to create pockets of time where we're deeply focused, deeply immersed in an activity. We've got the skills to match the challenge, and we have the right amount of time, and we have the right resources, and we can really get something meaningful done. That's a superpower in this world. I'm sure you experience it too, Ethan. I mean, and it doesn't have to only be in work. It can be in your leisure activities. Going surfing for me is a flow activity. Going running in nature is a flow activity, but so is podcasting, and so is running workshops, and so is working on technology or writing a blog post. So really prioritizing these little pockets of flow in your everyday work and life is important. The research shows, it's McKinsey research, a professional in flow is 500% more productive, and a team in flow doubles their productivity. And that opens up another huge question: is how can we create the conditions for teams to get into flow more effectively and more regularly? Because not only is it good for the business, but it's intrinsically rewarding for individuals. So in a nutshell, resilience is the learned ability to bounce, grow, connect, and flow. And this aligns very well with the definition of anti-fragility, which is all about growth. An entity that grows despite, or even though, there is challenge and adversity. And a good example of an anti-fragile system is a muscle. So you exert pressure on a muscle and it will grow in response. Muscles are anti-fragile systems, but on one condition: that we provide them space to rest and recover. If we don't give them space to rest and recover, that muscle will not be anti-fragile. In fact, it might burn out. So resilience is all about applying the same principles to ourselves. How can we grow despite adversity and create rhythms of recovery so that we can be resilient over the course of our lives?
Yeah, I love that, mate. What a powerful answer. It reminds me of sport, right? Where the biggest athletes, not only do they have coaches and things, but they sort of, play hard in their sport, but they rest well, to bounce back, like you were talking about there, which is important. I think the flow state one is massive, right? That you said there. And when you're in it, so to speak, because you're just like in this amazing thing. And from my understanding, I like it to know it from you, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, how do I get into this flow state? It sounds amazing. And it's almost like there's a small percentage, from my understanding, right, where it's a little bit sort of outside your comfort zone. It stretches you a little bit, but not too much, because if it's too much, then it can be a little bit overwhelming. So as long as it stretches you enough, and then you're like, okay, I'm growing to this, it's that little sort of band there, and then it's like bang, and you can just keep flowing in that area there. Is that right on my? I'd love to know from your perspective as well of how to sort of get into it a little bit more for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is a golden zone of flow. And if you push yourself a few percent beyond your perceived limits, you're likely to get an even deeper flow state, because there's a little bit of urgency and risk there. But you can't go too far beyond your perceived limits, because then we slide into anxiety and we start to worry about the outcome. So if you think about it, a big wave surfer doesn't just go and paddle out at Pipeline in Hawaii, one of the world's biggest waves, most dangerous waves, because one, they don't have the skills, they haven't practiced. Two, they're just going to be in a full-blown state of flight mode or freeze mode in terms of their nervous system. But if you incrementally increase your skills by 1% each time, pushing yourself into discomfort, you will eventually find yourself there and ready for that challenge. But there are some criteria for getting into flow state, as you said. One is to have the right skills for the challenge. If I don't have enough skills, I will become anxious. If I have too many skills, I'll probably get bored. It's not the right activity for me to get deep flow. And we can't expect to be in flow all the time. It's the kind of thing that perhaps you reserve 90 minutes per day. There's a reason why most sports matches, if you think of a football match, a rugby match, it's around 90 minutes with a little break in the middle. That's great for flow. I don't know what it says about cricket, especially test cricket. That's maybe only a few people are in flow at any one time. Race car drivers are kind of the super athletes of flow. They stay in that flow state for long, extended periods of time. But for most of us, around 90 minutes is max. So the right amount of time. Too much time, I get bored. Too little time, I get anxious. So you've got to pick the task well. So have a clearly defined task for this flow experience. So for example, if I said to you, Ethan, I'm going to write a book tomorrow, full-blown anxiety, way too big. If I say I'll write one word, probably get quite bored. If I say I'll write a chapter or a paragraph, now that's a great target for flow. And then I've got the right amount of time, I've got the right skills, and very important is to minimize distractions, because if my phone is pinging me and there's meeting invitations and someone's tapping me on the shoulder, I'll very quickly get derailed. So it's all about the right amount of time, the right skills for the challenge, and minimizing distractions from the environment. And then if you're serious about it, don't go and check the fridge to see if anything's changed, or just check your emails one last time before I give myself permission. Just press play, just dive in, and you'll start to find that you can cultivate flow almost as a habit. And I think that's a great place to be.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Lovely. Thank you for sharing that, and very practical things for people to jump into it here today. So now let's talk a bit more about resilience, right? And I guess there's a lot of skills, some top skills, I guess, that support the most resilient people out there. So what are some of these skills that we can be doing to focusing on to make sure that we can overcome those things and move forward when we want to?
Great question. So we do regular research at the Resilience Institute. It's part of my role at the Resilience Lab is to look at the data we've collected. So we have a tool called the Resilience Assessment, and hundreds of thousands of people around the world have used it over the years. And we can examine these data sets to look for trends and patterns. What are the skills that support the most resilient people, the highest performers? Last year's study was fascinating because in previous years, we found that focus, the ability to focus on what matters most to you, was the primary driver of resilience. But this has shifted, especially post-COVID. And we're finding a very interesting mix of skills supporting the most resilient people. So in the first position, for the first time, is fulfillment. And I think that's fascinating, so much so that it really influenced my forthcoming book, which is called Start with Values, because I clearly identify fulfillment as the top of the values pyramid. So we discovered fulfillment is the number one skill. And what does this mean practically for all of us and for the listeners out there? It's how often do you allocate a little bit of time to just reflect on what went well? We call it the WWW exercise. Just asking yourself, what actually went well today? There's a similar exercise called the 3 blessings or the gratitude journal, where at the end of each day, you just write down 3 things that went well. And the research shows this can even improve sleep quality, which is a big plus for many of us. And you'll see shortly why. So how often do we allocate that little bit of space for fulfillment? And I strongly encourage all of you who are in business to build some space for this exercise into your work in progress or your weekly team meeting, just to offset our tendency to focus on the negative, which is called our negativity bias. Humans are wired to search our environment for potential risks. And in our busy, upgraded world with so much demand for our attention, we can find ourselves constantly on high alert. It's called hypervigilance, just unable to relax because there is so much threat, whether it's from the news, from my social media feed, from my inbox. I never really take time out just to stop and regain presence and ask myself what went well. So strongly encouraged to, as a team, ask what went well last week. It's such a powerful question. Another way to frame it is, when last did you get flow? Because usually in flow state, you are at your peak. It's a peak experience and you're clear and present and enjoying your experience of life. So fulfillment was in number 1 spot. In number 2 spot was sleep. And this is something that most people are struggling with. In fact, there was a study around about 1912 that showed on average humans were sleeping 7.9 hours per night. The Gallup research from a couple of years ago showed on average we're sleeping 6.3 hours per night. So our sleep has been disrupted, and sleep is critical for all aspects of our well-being. You name it, from our ability to focus our minds through to metabolism, through to memory consolidation. Sleep is just critical. And there are many reasons for it. Everyone knows about the hazards of having too much blue light exposure in the evenings, even just stimulation from scrolling my device, especially in that last hour or two before bedtime. This can dramatically disrupt our sleep, and we're noticing it. Like the body, when we're exposed to bright blue frequencies of light, remember, our home star, the sun, emits a blue frequency of light. We even have a part of our biology called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is sensitive to blue light in our environment. And if I turn on an iPad and I've got a mobile phone here and a laptop in front of me and Netflix on a big screen, I'm bathing myself in the same frequency of light in the last part of the day. And the body says, hold on a second, get rid of all of that melatonin. It's dawn. I don't know how that happened, but the sun is up. And so suddenly we're less tired. It's more difficult to fall asleep. We may even wake up during the night because we didn't build up enough of a reservoir of melatonin earlier on. So a simple recommendation is just really manage light exposure, especially in the evenings. Purchase one of those decorative yellow bulbs, put it in your living room, and just really try and create some boundaries, because there are no light and day boundaries anymore. It's up to us to create them. So create some boundaries in the evening, maybe saying 3 hours before bed, I'll stop eating, 2 hours before bed, I'll stop drinking, and 1 hour before bed, I'll stop scrolling. And that's a simple way to increase sleep quality. So you've got fulfillment, sleep. In third place, we have bounce, which is the ability to navigate change and challenge. In fourth place, we have focus. So focus is still really important for our resilience, being able to focus ideally on what we can control. That's a good tool for everyone. When your mind is overloaded and you feel overwhelmed, write down everything that is of concern, and then place the things you can directly control in the inner circle. So draw 3 circles. In the inner circle, that's what I can control. The middle circle, maybe what I can influence, and the outer circle, everything else. And a lot of the time we find many of the things that are draining our cognitive resource are way beyond our direct control. So let go of them, focus on what you can control. And then in fifth place, fascinatingly, is relaxation. So relaxation, just there's active relaxation, which is kind of a breathing exercise. And there's passive relaxation, which is Netflix and a bottle of wine. Doesn't sound that bad, I'm sure, for many people, myself included, from time to time. But if that's the only way I can calm down my nervous system enough to fall asleep, that may be a little bit of an issue, because I'll probably wake up feeling less energized than I would otherwise. Remember, if I eat or drink too close to bedtime, my heart rate remains high all night long. You don't get as much restorative sleep. So finding ways to inject active relaxation into your day. And it can be as simple as tactical calm. It's an exercise we teach where you breathe in for 3 seconds, diaphragmatic breathing, feel your ribs expand outwards, and then breathe out for 5 seconds. The long exhalation slows down the heart. It's active relaxation. And the research shows if you build it into a meditation practice, it can actually have a longevity effect. You can actually lengthen your telomeres and live longer as a result of daily relaxation. So you've got some active factors in there, such as bounce and focus. You've got some recovery factors in there, such as sleep and relaxation. So that's performance and care. And I see fulfillment almost as an output of being highly resilient. You're enjoying your experience of life. You're finding meaning in what you do.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Love that. Very, very powerful there. And yes, I've got a blue light filter on my mobile that helps me at light time, get that sort of red screen happening in all these little areas to make sure that we're in there. And I love the breathing as well. I think breathing is so good and good to do just very simply before meetings during the day, right? And what you're doing, it's like you've always got time. There's no excuse to do those things, during the day. So yeah, love that, mate. Very, very practical, awesome stuff there. And yeah, let's get into core values now, which I know you've been touching on a little bit here. And I guess you've written a book, right, as well on it. So why have you written that? Tell us a bit more about it.
Yes, I was in a boardroom about 5 or 6 years ago, and one of the people in the room said, "Oh, values are a bunch of esoteric junk. You can't measure them using a heart rate monitor. what's the point? Why even talk about these kind of abstract concepts? And that got me thinking because, yeah, values can be those vinyl stickers on walls of companies that no one reads or tucked away on an About Us page of a website. But we all have values individually and collectively, whether we know them or not. Values are what is important to us, and that drives our behavior. Sometimes values are tucked away, they're hidden in the backdrop of our lives. We don't even realize that they're there. But it's only when we violate that value or we're not acting in alignment with it that it crystallizes and we realize we feel low level stress or maybe acute distress when we're acting out of alignment. An example is physical fitness might be something I've valued all my life. And that's great. I don't even realize it, but I just create space each day for exercise. And it's just something that I do. It's part of my identity. Or wealth accumulation might be a value. And I don't even realize it, but I'm ambitious. And it's really important to me that I see my savings increase over time. Now, in both of those cases, you will realize that you have that value. For example, if you have an injury and physical fitness is important to you, this is where many sports people find themselves in a deep depression at the bottom of the spiral because suddenly this thing that's so important to them is not possible, sometimes for a short time, sometimes for a long time, depending on the injury. So there you've discovered your value. And if you're not clear about what your values are, you just feel stressed and you're not sure why. The same with wealth accumulation. So wealth is important to you, wonderful. We've all got different values, but your major client contract is terminated, or you lose your job, or you're unable to work for a while. Suddenly, the fact that wealth is important to you is crystal clear. You feel it. It's visceral. You're like, wow, I'm not living a meaningful life. Something's been taken away. Or it could be that kindness is really important to you. That's one of your core values. And when you're not acting in a kind way because you're highly stressed or whatever, you really feel that life is not quite right. So there's a couple of different ways to look at this. I say first, let's all discover our personal values. And there's many tools inside of the book to help people on that discovery process. Then once we're clear about our values, how can we structure a life that is built up of a web of habits that are aligned with those values? And suddenly you're leading a meaningful life. And there'll be times in everyone's lives when you're acting in alignment with your values and it feels great. These are the times of your life. But there'll be times when you're really struggling. And often people feel so much stress, for example, in a job, and they're not sure why. It's just, I feel like I'm in the wrong place. Or I've just done a university degree and I'm hating this position that I'm in. I mean, why did I waste all of this time and money? And now I'm a lawyer. Or I mean, I've met many people who qualified as lawyers and then ended up working for not-for-profits, for example, because there was values misalignment. They wanted to do something good in the world and they felt that they weren't doing it in the other profession. So discovering your values is critical. Then you can start to build habits and ideally an identity around your values. So instead of my value is kindness, you say, I am a kind person. And then you build a web of habits that insert kindness into your everyday. And by the end of each day, you will feel a lot more aligned. You'll find that your actions are meaningful because you are being kind, and that's important to you. So there's a real difference between values and ideals. Ideals are things that we would like to be. Everyone would like to be altruistic and everyone would like to be inspirational and innovative or whatever it might be. But is it really you? Like, if innovation was taken out of your life, could you survive? And if the answer is no, then innovation is really one of your core values. So we deep dive into lots of this in the book. But then from an organizational perspective, values don't have to be those vinyl stickers that everyone rolls their eyes at. Your company has values, and it's based on how people interact, what's most important often to the executive team, because we can say we value collaboration and creativity, but if the real value is just financial performance, it's worthwhile being upfront about that. So you attract the right people who are, looking for a position where financial performance is critical to the overall organization's success. So being clear about it and potentially co-creating values with your team. And that's something that I've built some tools for. And it's fascinating. There was a German tech firm that worked with me, and they had a value statement. They felt it was a bit out of date. They decided, let's find out what's most important to our people. And the top two values they would never have known otherwise. It was actually flexibility and harmony. So when they discovered that flexibility and harmony were so important to their people, they rewrote their own value statement to incorporate those, but they also brought in some tools. They said, okay, flexible working, you're all allowed to work wherever you want, whenever you want. And number two, we're going to implement leadership, empathy training, nonviolent communication training so that we can create a more harmonious atmosphere within the organization. It was a game changer. So values don't have to be, these cliched kinds of things that every business needs a mission and a vision and some values and whatever. They can be real tools you can use to make decisions. If I'm making a decision, can I put on the lens of kindness? Can I put on the lens of fitness? Can I put on the lens of wealth, for example, and view that challenge or opportunity through that lens? And they're great ways to align behavior and build trust within a team, because if we know that what's important to all of us is aligned, well, there's going to be a lot less ambiguity. People will feel confident being autonomous and making decisions and being a bit more agile in the moment. And I think that's what most companies are after.
Yeah, awesome, mate. I love that. And yeah, having a book like that, the process, because normally, yeah, you need to elicit the value, so to speak. You need to go through a process, right, to do it. So I think that would be very invaluable of what's in there. And then, yeah, moving forward with the team, I completely agree with, it's what's actually being demonstrated. And if you can get incorporated and everyone gets part of it, then everything just increases the performance, the, fulfillment, all of that, right, in the organization. So love it, mate. Really, really powerful. And I know you also talk about like 5 types of core values as well, right? In terms of what we're doing there as well, in terms of and how they can help us, I guess, in work and life. Do you want to unpack that a little bit more for us too?
Absolutely. So as part of the research for the book, I've created a values pyramid where we group values based on different types. Now, there are many different models that people have created over the years. What I like about this particular framework is that it incorporates survival values. Most values frameworks don't acknowledge that when we're under pressure, when we're experiencing danger or threats, whether real or perceived, our nervous system activates these ancient responses to challenge. It could be fight, flight, or freeze. And we all share this with most animals. If you encounter a snake in the grass, its first action is usually to freeze, and then it decides whether to fight or get out of there. We've got the same basic mechanism in terms of how our nervous system perceives and responds to threat. And when we're in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, values aligned action becomes really challenging. We're operating on a survival level. So it's important to acknowledge that. And there are certain values that secure our survival, such as finance, such as safety, such as having shelter, and so forth. If one of those is taken away, being altruistic probably is going to be less feasible for most of us. There are people out there like a Mother Teresa or a Gandhi or whoever who can operate both in survival mode and with high level values. But for most of us, being in survival mode undercuts or short circuits our values aligned action. The next layer up is belonging. And I think belonging is so critical for all of us as a social species. When it's not there, we experience these epidemics of loneliness and depression and distress. So belonging. Then we have growth values. This is all about mastery, doing interesting things, learning, applying skills to the world. It's also where we really practice our physical vitality, whatever is important to you, but we're building our capacity. The next layer up is impact, and impact is really important. That's where we ask the question, am I being recognized for all of this hard work? What is my level of prestige or status? How am I perceived? What's my reputation? Because after we've mastered a bunch of skills, you can imagine it, you can see it in most people's lives, certainly in mine. Find some friends for the journey, that's belonging. Learn some new skills, great. Now, am I being paid properly for what I'm doing? I'm adding a lot of value here. That's impact, recognition, wealth. And then at the very top of the pyramid is fulfillment, because you can go through all of those levels where you value different things, and most people have values across the spectrum, some belonging, some growth, some impact, some fulfillment. But at some point in our lives, we stop and reflect and ask the question, is this meaningful? Because I can be a high impact person, but feel quite empty. If you think about most billionaire philanthropists, they they end up around age 50, 55, 60 perhaps, and they start asking the question, even though I've got billions of dollars, is that all there is? I thought there was going to be more once I hit that, 2 billion target or whatever it might be. You don't have to be a billionaire. Many people find this over the course of their lives. What can I give back? And it's usually being of service or experiencing states of awe or being at peace or experiencing deep gratitude for this life that we've led. And it's quite introspective. So the layers are survival, belonging, growth, impact, and fulfillment. And I think a healthy spread is to have one value in each one of those categories. You know, 5 values is perhaps a bit too much. So many experts would say 5 values is good, but can you remember them and use them actively in your day-to-day challenges and activities to make decisions and to align your behavior? So I'm suggesting 3 core values. Brene Brown, in her work Dare to Lead, she suggests having 2, but that might become a bit rigid if the only ways I can view a situation are through physical fitness and kindness. Okay, but there's this other challenge here, and I'm not quite sure which one to use. So having 3 values, I think, gives you a little bit more flexibility. But yeah, those are the key stages, and I think life is a journey of changing values. I mean, if once you have children, your values shift dramatically overnight. It goes from being whatever it was before. For me, it was freedom and adventure to patience and security. And then gradually, as the kids start to get older, you start to open up again and go, okay, so what else is out there? I've raised a little human that seems to be quite independent and self-sufficient. Now I can start shifting back to what's important to me. So recognizing that values are dynamic and flexible, I think really helps. And yeah, having some tools along the way, as I list in the book, can be really useful.
Yeah, awesome, man. Love that. Very, very powerful section. And yeah, a lot to unpack. And then once you're clear on those, you can really create a lot more meaning and fulfillment, right, in life from there. So love that, and understanding that, as a whole as well with the people around you. So yeah, amazing. Let's talk more about team now. So I guess a lot of people, they always say, high performance, everything like that, right? Like, how do I get the most out of my team? And yes, that's important, right? Especially if we get them into that flow state that we've been talking about, or whatever that is there. So I guess if we wanted to really build a really quality high performance team, what are some of those keys to getting there?
Yeah, I think that psychological safety and trust are really important. And that can come from having aligned values. Some teams will actually create a set of values specifically for their team. It's not to say that the organizational values are unimportant, but some organizations have values that are quite grandiose and maybe less relevant for a team that's trying to build the next AI large language model or something like that. So coming up with some values for your team. This is how we operate together. You can also draw inspiration, if you wish, from some of the most high performance organizations out there, such as sports teams, even the military, like the Navy SEALs, for example, or the Marines, where core values really are at the core. This is how we operate. This is our kind of rules of engagement with each other and beyond. And if we can align our behaviors with that, that's, I think, a solid foundation for high performance. That also creates trust because we know where everyone's coming from. Beyond that, I think finding people who are willing to invest and care about your business. No one's going to care about your business as much as you do. So as the leader, I often feel myself that I care more than pretty much anyone else. And that's correct because you should as the leader. And your goal is to bring the best out of your people. Another quote that I often think about is success is succession. So how are you building up those people so that they can be autonomous and be the best versions of themselves? So creating that growth mindset within the team is critical. If you have people with a real fixed mindset, that's going to hinder high performance from my perspective. And then having some tools to help them along the way. So I've run resilience training workshops for many, many organizations. Some come to us with the use case of we want to build a high performing team. Some come to us simply because they're dealing with some kind of disruption and they just want to get through. My favorites are those high performing teams because that's where you can say, okay, so what are the rhythms that will support us to be a high performing team? What can we do differently? Are we spending the first half of the day just processing emails? Because that's not high performance. No one gets to the end of the year or the end of their career and says, I wish I spent more time emailing. Not at all. That's not where the impact comes from. I mean, sometimes it can, you've reached out to someone and they reply or whatever it is. But so creating some rhythms, and one thing I've seen work particularly well is everyone reserving that first 90 minutes for their flow activities, not the most urgent, but the most important activities. Then creating some space for rest and recovery, just as a sports team would, maybe reconnecting, having some time for social interaction. Then we go back and do the mundane activities. So before lunch, we might spend an hour processing emails, catching up on to-do lists, whatever else. And then after lunch, perhaps there's a short flow zone, just one more really important thing that we're all going to do, perhaps in groups. And then for the rest of the day, it's meetings. Now you've just rewired your team for high performance because most people will put meetings and emails at the start of the day. And by 3 or 4 or 5 p.m., you don't have quite the cognitive resource to really get into the most meaningful activities. So rhythm, and for a leader to walk the talk and say, I really believe in this idea of flow state. I want us to all experience this intrinsically rewarding and highly impactful state. So how can we do it better? Let's create a protocol. I was with an engineering firm where they would hoist up a black balloon on a stick when someone's going into their flow zone, and everyone recognized it and respected it. We won't tap that person on the shoulder for the next couple of hours. But if a leader really walks the talk and demonstrates the importance of these rhythms, demonstrates, hey, I'm not on my emails at 11 p.m. at night. And I'm not going to tell you what to do, flexibility, but I highly encourage you to do the same because look, I am wide awake, feeling quite fresh because I got a good night's sleep. And actually, as part of a high performance team, we really do hope that you all get a good night's sleep. And if you're not getting a good night's sleep, feel safe to come and talk to me and we can organize some training. And so you create this open dialogue so your company can become a bit more playful. There was a documentary and David Attenborough said, it is through play that the lion cubs develop agility. Now, I've walked around so many buildings where I see agility scrawled on whiteboards, like that's what we want to be. We want to be agile. But no one creates that space for play and experimentation and the ability to fail from time to time and learn from the failures. So from the psychological safety comes that space to play, but also creating pockets of time for high performance and care, these rhythms, and modeling the behaviors you wish to see in your company. And I think you can build a great culture that is, ready to perform at its best.
Yeah,
Long
love it,
answer.
mate.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That was awesome. I love it. Yeah, I talk a lot about yeah, having people and hiring like 80% is good, right? As that's a good outcome. And I think also from a performance perspective is like don't push people too much past that 80% as well, just like you were talking about. You need those playful times, those little bits to rest, throughout the day and not because if you push people too hard, that leads to burnout, right? In a high performing team. So you need both of those elements. So yeah, really powerful stuff.
I really love your 80% approach because I think it's so important not to expect the same from others. You're there for a reason. You're in that role. And I'm sure at points in your life, you've reported to someone who was way better than you are at certain things. So use it as an opportunity to grow people and don't expect them to care as much or be as good as you. I love that.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful. So awesome, mate. Love that. And I know you've traveled to over 50 countries, right? And interviewed, hundreds of people as well from around the world. So yeah, just tell us a little bit more about, what you've learned from that as well.
I think the key that I learned through my travels was that most people are good. Most people would love nothing more than to invite you into their home. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Indonesia or Bangladesh or Estonia or whatever. Most people are curious. They would love to connect with you. The world is actually a good place. And most people are interested in living a good life. I mean, thousands of years ago, the ancient Greeks were fascinated by this idea of eudaimonia or flourishing. And I think many people still want that. We've just become a little bit maybe influenced or addicted to technology. We seek out comfort, which is natural. Humans love comfort, and to achieve a comfortable state is amazing when you consider what our ancestors went through to get us to a point where we can choose when to be comfortable and when to experience distress. You know, going to the gym. Can you imagine one of our ancestors 10,000 years ago realizing that what people are one day going to intentionally pick up heavy things and make themselves sweat for fun, like going to a CrossFit class. People do this and they're not catching animals. Yeah, it's quite interesting to think about how we've changed our environment and how we're adapting to the modern environment. And those are the stories I love sharing. So perhaps one that I'll share with you is of Kung Fu masters in Vietnam. So I went over there, I heard they're highly resilient, and I there was a misunderstanding in one of the dojos. So I turned up. I had a translator who mapped out the trip. I had no idea where I was going. I was just on the back of a little moped, landing up in the back streets of Hanoi. And in one of these dojos, there was a slight misunderstanding. So I walk in. There's a bucket of beer in the middle of the floor and two chairs, and lots of guys training along the side. And the Kung Fu master sits on one chair, I sit on the other chair, and he proceeds to drink beers and like signal that I should match him beer for beer. I was like, I can do this, fine. I'm asking questions, the translator is asking him, and then he says, now it's time for the demonstration. So I turn around, oh, great, Kung Fu demonstration, this will be awesome. Oh, no, you're in it. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. I'm here to write, not fight. No, writer, not fighter. Anyway, that went really badly because I ended up in the middle of the floor with the Kung Fu master, who apparently was the cousin or something of Bruce Lee's master. I mean, blows your mind. Thrown around a dojo for a few hours, but had a great time, thankfully for the beers. But the real gem from that trip was going to another dojo where I met one of the oldest Kung Fu masters in Vietnam. His name was Master Huang, and he told me amazing stories about their resilience and how the rich martial arts heritage kept people ready for anything, including invasions from two superpowers, the US and China. That's from his perspective. These are invasions, and it's our martial arts, our kung fu, and our mindset that got us through these terrible dark times. Amazing. I asked him a question at the end of the interview that I always ask people, which is any words of advice that I can take out and share with others. And after a long pause, everyone was waiting to hear what he would say. He said one word, which was, I won't pronounce this correctly, but it was kung. And I thought, this is going to be profound. I look at the translator. The translator looks at me and says, kung means no, no words of wisdom. It's like, oh, okay. So a bit of an anticlimax. Sorry for everyone out there. I walk off to the door, and then he called me back and he said, always carry a small flame because a small flame can burn down the whole jungle. And I really love this small flame idea because it's something that we can nurture by adding new skills to our toolbox of skills. It's something that we can use to light the way in times of challenge. And it's something potentially we can illuminate the path for others with. So I love the small flame idea. That's something that always stands out as being prominent, something I learned along the way on this trip and ultimately became part of my resilience and values frameworks. I think that this idea of adding new skills to your small flame as you navigate through life is critical. So in a nutshell, met so many people and learned that most people are good and there is so much wisdom around us. It's just a case of stopping and allowing people to share it.
Yeah, love it, mate. It's really awesome, and yeah, I've done a lot of traveling overseas, and I think on top of that as well is just meeting so many different types of people, and it allows you to understand how to connect with them, right? Because everyone's different. There's a lot of different types of personalities, and in Australia, especially in a lot of other countries, there's a lot of diversity, right, as well. So it's really a superpower, right, on how to build relationships with people, whether it's within a business or partnerships, collaborations, other things like that. Outside of that, I think the travel, allows you to do that more so. So yeah, love it, mate. Really, really powerful, and definitely recommend people to get themselves out there more to to connect and see where it leads. And yeah, so much of a powerful episode, mate. You've delivered us so much gold here today. And I will ask you the same question, so to speak, funnily enough, but hopefully I'm sure we'll get a different answer. Is what one key piece of advice would you like to give to all the entrepreneurs watching and listening today?
Stay curious. I think sometimes we lose our curiosity. We get so caught up in the grind set that our vision becomes quite narrow, and we lose track of opportunities that might be popping up in our peripheral vision, things that could be really important, dots that you can only connect looking backwards, as Steve Jobs said. So stay curious and create pockets of time in your day to just alternate between that deep focus, which we're all getting pretty good at. We're trying to get lots done, and alternate with wide angle presence. Step back, maybe go outside for a few minutes, enjoy some sunshine, listen to the birds, look at the ants. They're pretty busy too. And stay curious, because you never know. It's in those moments. I think I wrote in one of my books, the magic happens between thoughts. So create some space for that magic to happen wherever it happens best for you, in a flow activity, walking in nature, outside, maybe doing some deep breathing, maybe having coffee with a good friend. But create space for those moments, because that's often where the magic happens.
Yeah, I love that. So powerful, mate. And you just thought me about one thing where I used to tell my wife, it's like, I need some space of like thinking to allow the intuitive thoughts to come in sometimes, right? As well, because you can think about them in the shower or these other areas. So that's really powerful. And that curiosity just makes us want to do more and be, move forward in a variety of ways. So yeah, really powerful, mate. Love that. And yeah, we connected, through our network. So I learned about your awesome journey from being in various creative and tech roles to now leading, the Resilience Lab at the Resilience Institute. Awesome guy, mate. So knowledgeable. And I'm sure you continue to, share tools that upgrade consciousness and elevate the human experience. Very grateful that we connected, and we'll be able to be on both of each other's podcasts, and look forward to connecting further, mate, with you. So yeah, how can people find you, get in contact with you?
Feel free to visit my website. It's bradleyhook.com, Bradley, hook, HOOK.com. If you're interested in my forthcoming book, it's called Start with Values. If you search for Start with Values in Google, you'll find it. It's available for pre-order right now. So if anyone would like to pre-order it, I'd love that. I'd be super happy to feature your testimonial if you write one, or a review on my website, along with a link to your website if you'd like some search engine juice, if that's important to you. Yeah, you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, pretty active on there. I share clips from my podcasts. It's just, if you search Bradley Hook. And the same on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So you can find me at Bradley Hook. Very happy to connect with people. I love it. As you can tell, I'm a people person. It brings a lot of fulfillment. And yeah, thank you, Ethan. A lot of people say to me, I love what you're doing. And I sometimes feel like, but what am I doing? I'm just having conversations with people I find interesting, and doing stuff that I enjoy, along with a lot of stuff that I don't enjoy. I mean, I too do admin and receipt reconciliation and all the boring stuff which has to be done. But I have to say, I had that same feeling about you. I thought, wow, you're really doing something great. So thank you for the opportunity. I've really appreciated it. And I'm looking forward to sharing our interview on my podcast, the Brad Hook podcast, in due course.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Love that. Really powerful. It definitely has been a pleasure, in a variety of ways. And yeah, definitely check out Bradley, whichever way, Bradley Hook, on his website, the books, socials, LinkedIn, all of that, and the podcast. Amazing stuff there. And yeah, really, really powerful, mate. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, thanks for being on the Business Growth Show.
Thanks, Ethan, and thank you all.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Business Growth Show, where we talk about everything on business growth. And please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Ethan Casiotis, or visit my website, ethancasiotis.com. And if you want to grow and scale your business, you can reach out to me on any platform to see if we're a good fit. So until next time, remember that our business grows where we learn skills and take action using them in spite of fear. So let's create wealth and freedom together.